Hello, hello, everyone. It is Kenyon here. It is Basketball Rewind. I am joined by the two amazing gentlemen that you see on the screen before you, Coach Roache, as well as Beyond the Locker Room. Today, I'm going to be doing another episode preview for you guys, which is we are going to be joined by these two people and talking about something about, let's say, ISO ball, which everyone seems to love. Whether it is the Raptors or not, ISO ball seems to have grown throughout the NBA and it is trending upwards year over year over year. Something that doesn't seem like the most fun thing to play as, especially if any of you have played in the YMCA or your local gyms, but there seems to be a reason why we're trending that way. And I want to pick these two guys' brains to see what they think is the reason. I have my own thoughts, and we'll just kind of see where the conversation goes from there. So, with that being said, let's get into it. Coach, your thoughts. Why do you think that the NBA seems to be going ISO heavy?
Well, it features a lot of the best players with the ball. That's why. See, in a team atmosphere, a team environment, you might not get the best player with the ball in his hands a lot. But with ISO ball, literally by definition, it is one player has the ball, the other players get out of the way. They space out, right? So you're going to see a lot of LeBron, KD, Pascal Siakam for that matter, a lot with the ball in their hands. ISO ball can work in stretches, but it's not something that you want to run a lot of the time. You also need the right personnel to do it. So I'll give you an example. If you are Pascal Siakam, you have the ball 18 feet away from the hoop. You ideally want to have spacers on the court, but if you don't have the personnel who can space the court, how effective is ISO ball going to be? Not very effective. So you need to have the right personnel to do so. Um, but look, it is trending more that way in the NBA. It features the best player. Best player has the ball more. The best player can make the plays, get the highlights and stuff like that. It's not to say that it doesn't work because it can work um, in spurts, in my opinion. I mean, Kawhi Leonard is an excellent isolation basketball player. Arguably, you could say he is the best isolation basketball player in the league. Um, but the problem with the Raptors this year is that we saw it a bit too much, and we don't have the personnel really to play ISO ball, more or less outside of Siakam. And who's Siakam going to pass to if they can't space the floor outside of maybe Gary Trent and sometimes OG?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just tag off that last point a little bit, and not to just make this just a Raptors show, but focusing on the Raptors is a good point. I talked to someone today about Luka versus Siakam, right? And one of the things that I talked about in that conversation was that you know, they were like, "Oh, well, Siakam doesn't do X, Y, and Z, or the offense isn't that efficient." Well, actually, if you look historically, especially if you go back, what was it? Basically, last year, he was pretty darn efficient. Like through all of the times that he has been an All NBA level player, it has been extremely efficient. I think the first time he got All NBA, he was essentially at efficient to the level of Luka. So at that point, it's kind of hard to go against that. I remember hearing Mike D'Antoni talk about the reason why he went to Harden ball basically. And he said, "Oh, well, because the numbers told us that that is the most amount of points per possession." Now, it sounds like I'm advocating for more iso ball with Siakam. To your guys' point, I know Beyond hasn't spoke yet, but I don't think he'll disagree with this. But I watched a possession where Siakam had to create on his own, and he had surrounding him Boucher, Thad, Flynn, and I can't remember who else was there, but it was I think it might have been OG, but they were covering OG, and if he passed to OG, that would have been taken. So that's who you were playing with.
Mm-hmm.
That's very, very challenging to do. To be able to do it, and keep in mind, he still produced at an 80, percentile and above level in terms of efficiency, but that's challenging to do. I think my reasoning, it seems to be that yes, I think Nurse has even talked about this. The ball seems to find the best players on the court, but at the same time, I think that analytics plays a bigger role, and maybe we're going too far into analytics at some times to the point where, hey, we're almost trying to homogenize how we play because this is what a computer tells me is the best way to play. And I don't know if that's necessarily the best thing for basketball. Beyond.
All right, so I will jump on your point because I think you were a little more explicit with it than Coach. But I think one of the reasons I have maybe three reasons in my head why this is happening, and you guys touched on the first one, which I think is the analytics. I think a lot of times, let's face it, they all want to get as many threes up in the air as possible. And what's the simplest way to get threes up in the air? Put it in your best player's hand and let him draw a double team. And then let the carousel begin, right? Whip, 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 and you get to a guy in the corner, boom. So that is really the rationale behind a lot of this, a lot of why this is spiking, in my mind. The second, and also too, from an analytics standpoint too, is that, hey, the Raptors are notorious for this too. You hear all the time, you hear media guys always talk about this talking point. It's like, hey man, they're one of the best teams when it comes to turnover ratio. They won't turn over the ball. Well, when you're playing one-on-one, you're playing stuff like that, you ain't gonna turn over the ball much if it's always in one guy's hands, okay? So it's low risk in this case here, which leads to my next phase in this case, which goes to coaching. No disrespect, Coach, your fraternity in this case here, but at least in the NBA, I would say even some of the lower levels of college and who maybe in this case less maybe high school, but definitely college and I'm not sure probably AAU. I think there's a mindset of like, hey man, less risk is better for us for job security. So therefore, why am I looking to implement a nice fancy offense? Because if that don't work out too well, guess who they're gonna point at? Moi. But if I just say I'm putting it in my best player's hand, ain't no one gonna go after me in that case. Who could get upset with Nick Nurse? I put the ball in my best player's hands. What argument can you give for that? So there's a lot of that going on in the NBA thing. I think, as I said before, you'll see a lot more in college now than beforehand. You used to have distinctive offenses in college. You used to have obviously the Princeton offense. Used to have the 40 minutes of hell in Arkansas. They had a certain way they played. UNLV had a certain style how they played. Duke was a lot of backdoor cuts and all sorts of stuff like that. You had styles of offense. Now everyone, I couldn't tell you if Connecticut was playing this case here versus San Jose State. They all play essentially the same way, right? Because everybody now wants to make sure they have job security now because no one wants to implement any offense that might be risky in this case. Except for Princeton, they still holding on, so props to them. But everybody else, that's really what they're going to, because everyone wants job security. Hey man, the money's great. If you're an NBA coach or even a college coach, you live in fine dining. Like you getting like the primo sirloin steak when you go to the restaurant. You good. If you're in top college or top NBA or even some of the AAU teams, you're straight. And I think there's that involved with the money. The money is so big. No one wants to lose an opportunity to have a job like that. And the last part I would say in this case here, this might be a bit of a cultural thing. I'm not sure or not, or at least on the North American side, where, you always see this. When you have a trailblazer, it's always great when the trailblazer does it. It was fantastic in this case here when Michael Jackson's doing Michael Jackson. But when you get like the fourth Xerox copy of Michael Jackson, the 14th Xerox copy of Michael Jackson, ain't really as good as the original. Right. So when Michael Jordan, Jeffrey Jordan came to the league, he has a style, obviously, that is eye-popping. It is hard for your eyes to take away from the screen. And he did it so well. And everyone came up looking at that as that is the blueprint. Now, I'm from an era before, kind of, I would say, call it, this PMJ. Pre-MJ. I knew what used to look back then. You used to have, right. It's like Larry Bird has the ball at the top of the key. Oh, sweet bounce back. No, look here to Kevin McHale. Like I used to know what I used to look like till Jordan came around in this case here. Even the Pistons had their own thing with floppy sets for the two guards and stuff like that. There's nothing like that nowadays. It's like, hey man, put the ball in there because everyone said hey, that must have worked for MJ. It'll work for me. We all know the answer. You all ain't MJ, right? So there's that element as well too with it. And I think to be careful, there's ideal ways. I put it this way: there's good ISO and there's bad ISO. Good ISO in this case here, I would say you need ISO in the playoffs because in this case, even if you're running stuff, everyone knows it by the time you get the playoffs. So you need now it comes down to talent. Can my guy beat your guy? And that is what it comes down to because everyone knows when you do your plays in this case here, and that's what got Golden State in trouble quite a few times when they didn't win the championship because they didn't have enough ISO guys to get their own shot. So until Curry improved himself as a one-on-one player, obviously they got that guy in this case here, the Slim Reaper over there, and they brought him in. Then it made it a lot easier. But before that, what happened to them against Cleveland was they didn't have enough guys to get their own shot when it came down to it. And Cleveland had at least two dudes could get their shot at anybody. And that really was the difference in the series. And if they were to play those series 10 times, I would say Cleveland probably win that series at least 6 times out of 10 times against Golden State for those very reasons. Because when it comes down to it, I got the two best guys to get a shot more than you do in this case here. And that's what it comes down to a lot of times in the playoffs. And I think that is when ISO is necessary. You need at least 2, maybe 3 guys to be a top line team if you want to win a championship. In the regular season, you can run stuff in this case and get all the role player guys involved and guys that might not be as talented to do what they need to do. But in the playoffs, then ISO ball, you're gonna need some ISO players if you want to win a championship.
Yeah.
I think. Oh, sorry, Coach.
No, you were saying about the set offenses in the college, like the high post UCLA offense that was famous with, I think, with John Wooden and stuff like that, and the Princeton offense and stuff like that. The 2014 Spurs was the best offense I have ever seen in my life. It was the best basketball. It was pass team. It was all kinds of cutting. It was mismatches, and they just destroyed the Miami Heat that year. So there's that aspect where, and there wasn't a lot of ISO ball ran in that series. It was ball movement, it was cutting, it was back screens, it was taking a look at mismatches. But since then, though, you're right, we've kind of steered towards more heavy ISO ball. ISO ball can work when you have mismatches too. So if Siakam has a smaller guard guarding him, more or less, from a switch or something, that's what you want. Because I don't know how many times I've been involved in the game and we'll yell clear out off a switch. Some guy who's a lot smaller, just not very good, is guarding the best player on the team. And then you want that. You want that clear out then.
Yeah. I would just rebuff the San Antonio part a little bit because they had like already a burgeoning best one. You just mentioned his name. In this case, that guy Kawhi. He was already a pretty good one-on-one player then, and they had arguably one of the best penetrating point guards that we've seen in the last 25 years. And they have arguably the best power forward to ever walk the planet. So
no, there was some ISO in that, but it wasn't much though. There was a lot of team ball.
But those they create advantages in this case here that made it easy for the guys to knock down shots like Danny Green all over the place wide open because they couldn't guard those guys. So the collapse of the defense. All I'm saying is like even in their scenario, it triggered those opportunities for those talented one-on-one players. Still triggered the same carousel that we see. Oh, out comes threes for Ginobili, out comes threes for Green, out comes threes for Boris Diaw, and so on. They was back cuts and stuff. I'm not saying that, but when they were pressed, they could then flip the switch if they had to do it.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Ideally you want to be able to do both your team.
Right.
You probably want to go to ISO when it's necessary, and you want to rely on the motion, we'll call it the motion offensives, when you have to as well.
Yeah, I'm fascinated with that matchup was they were probably playing arguably the best fast break team ever. The Miami, those Heatles, once they were running, it was a wrap. It was a wrap. And they finished off in spectacular fashion when they did it. I never see people throw like 45, 50-foot alley oops and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean that they were.
Think about that. It's like
that was a whole other type of team, honestly. And even them, the Heatles, they had like 2 different versions of their offense. One that was a little bit more ISO heavy around. It was like the LeBron ball versus like the Wade and LeBron ball, which was 2 different. Obviously, the LeBron ball, I mean, was the most efficient that they ever played. But at the same time, LeBron is LeBron. Here's the other thing that so to pick off that, I will agree. The college ball has kind of gone downhill. I will say that the women's college ball still has quite a lot of creativity.
Yep.
I enjoyed their final four, we'll say, more so than just the regular men's NCAA. I heard certain people say, oh, for example, Becky Hammond doesn't know how to coach and all this kind of stuff. She just has a super team. And then I actually watched the game, and I was like, these people don't know what the heck they're talking about. I'm like,
Yeah, it's one of those things where like the Aces were like struggling to get over the hump for the last few years, and she
with
figured
Bill Lambier for many years, and she completely, they were
whoop them all the time.
They went from one of the lowest 3-point attempting teams and percentage-wise teams to one of the best in the league. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing what a system can do. So, for people who say that coaching doesn't matter, I think coaching can actually matter. The talent obviously needs to be there to a certain extent, but
on the margins it matters. Like when you get to the high stakes, it starts to matter. Then maybe like regular season, maybe not as much, but once you get those things where you talk about conference and finals and just playoffs, it matters a lot. And just a side point to your college basketball, I think the viewers actually agree with you, because the ratings for the Final Four for the women were higher than the men's.
They were. I think it was over double. So, in fact, maybe over. I don't have the numbers, but I vaguely remember 9 million for one and like 2 or 3 million for the other. So it's around there. But yeah. The other thing that I will say is this. Now, this gets into something that we were talking about before, but clock management is something that's very interesting, because with ISO ball, again, if you don't have the right amount of cutting or the right players who can cut around the ISO. So again, it's, if you want to pick on the Raptors, it's like sometimes we had dudes that didn't really work well off ball, right? Siakam actually was one that cut, funny enough. But there was a lot of other dudes that didn't really seem to cut a lot. And so if you're this is almost like the difference between, at times, Luka versus Trey and their respective offenses. Now, there's times when I think that Luka could have used more, offensive sets in his, in fact, to be honest, in terms of the way that they played, I thought they played a much higher up-tempo game, shocking people. I will actually give Kyrie Irving credit. People think I don't like him. That's a whole other discussion for another day. But I think in terms of the tempo at which they played and the way and speed at which they moved the ball, it improved with him in the lineup. Yeah. I think what I'm trying to get at is that if you watch the Hawks this past year, with or without Snyder, with the ball in, a certain Mr. Young's hands, I think what we saw is that there was stagnation around the ball. And so one of the ways that I think that you can improve that is, yes, moving the ball around. I think if you're going to get the ball, you're more willing to do some of the dirty work at times. But I also think that in terms of clock management, I think the game moves a lot faster, especially if you're trying to win the possession game. Sometimes you want to go away from ISO ball, to be honest, instead of searching for that specific mismatch.
Right. But see, this goes back to the point I was making earlier about the coaches in this case trying to deploy an offense or put an offense into existence. Because take, for example, Memphis, right? Memphis will put the ball in Jaw's hands. It makes perfect sense in this case. But I've also seen them try to put the ball in Bane's hands to create. Now, Bane shouldn't be in a situation where he should be creating in this case. Now, maybe over time he gets better at it. But I think it's one of those things where it's like, to me, that's where it's on the coach. Like, you got to find what's your strength of your players, man. Like it's a 2 bounce for Bane, and that's it. If you can't get the hoop, pull up or find another option in this case. But you having him out there, at times isolating this, especially when you see them in scenarios when Jaw's out, it'll be fascinating to see what happens this season. You see how they deploy Bane, and if you're going to give him more, ISO opportunities. I'm going to be fascinated to see that, because you got him and Smart. It's going to be fascinating to see how that plays out, because he's another one that's like, how many ISOs you want to give Smart? Right? Like, so I'm going to be fascinated to watch Memphis play those first 25, 30 games, because someone's going to get to eat up those ISO opportunities that were Jaw's opportunities. And now with Tyus out now, who would have taken some of those, It's gonna be interesting to see how that happens, because I think a lot of times we just kind of let the coaches off the hook for these type of things. Like, and I said, I don't want to just pick on the Raptors. That's obviously known, documented. Folks that listen here on this podcast know my feelings about that offense. But there's other coaches around the league where I sit there and shake my head sometimes, like, man, there's got to be an easier way, guys. There's got to be an easier way.
Now, here's one other thing that I'm really curious about, and I know we can probably expand this out into another topic another day, but I'm wondering, and you see it, right? With Luka is a good example. Having to play iso ball that much, and part of it is a coach's decision. I don't think players go and say, I want the ball 80% of the time or 30% of the time. I don't think that that's how the conversation goes. Sometimes it does, right? Because there's definitely sometimes when I've seen, like, Jimmy Butler, for example, is like, nah, we aren't doing that. Just give me the ball, right? For sure. But at the same time, I'm wondering if I'm gonna pick on Luka a bit, but I'm gonna give him credit at the same time, because I know that when he plays in the Euros, he has a little bit more pep in the step on both sides of the ball. So what I'm getting at is that it seems extremely taxing to play that type of style game in and game out, regardless of how athletic you are. In fact, it's even more so. And I'm wondering if that could potentially, I have not done any research on this, but I'm wondering what that, and maybe that's why it's a better topic for another day. But I'm wondering how much that can lead to potential risk of injuries.
Well, Coach, you go ahead. But as the Mavericks fan, I'll wait. Go ahead. The floor is yours.
Well, I mean, I think there's a variety of reasons why it could be. If someone is playing iso ball and they have the basketball, um, let's just say they try to get to the hoop. Well, all the defense is going to collapse then. So you have more defenders coming at you potentially. So there's risk of potential injury that way if everybody's collapsing on you, right? All the dribbling, all the ground you have to cover as well, especially if you get a good defender that's on you while you're playing iso ball. It's definitely a taxing way to play basketball. That's for sure. I mean, it's I don't know what I'm curious to know what the statistics would be on that iso ball and injuries.
Yeah, I need to go look it up, because I am curious to just look through
Well,
how
I
many
actually would say it's the
games.
opposite, actually.
Yeah, I guess, well, if you play, like, for example, like Luka, right? I'll use him as an example. You're only playing one half of the floor, so that's
Well,
one way.
that's not the way I'm thinking about it in this
Okay,
case,
go
right?
for it.
Because I'm thinking, if you look at a lot of the most ISO heavy players, with the exception of Kawhi, probably most of them tend to stay pretty healthy. I think one of the reasons why is that since they are in such control of the ball in the situation, they know where to put their body in a place where they won't get hurt, right? When you're now doing stuff like cutting and you're backdoor cutting and stuff like that, you might backdoor right into a charge. You might roll into the for alley oop, and next thing you know, boom, you're getting undercut. When you have the ball in your hands all the time, you can control your thing. So LeBron, Harden, Luka, those guys are probably some of the heaviest minutes in this case, and played the most minutes in games you could think of. So there, so I just wonder a little bit, like, even someone like Chris Paul, who tends to get hurt near the end of the season, he does play a lot of games during the season, and he's now playing for like 20 years in the league, right? So he's a guy that's a pretty one-on-one to control the. There's no one more control than Chris Paul, like, so, like, half for a set. So, like, I'm just thinking that in some ways it might actually be a healthier response in this case, in some ways, than maybe if you're doing some of the other stuff and things of that nature. I mean, heck, even Siakam is probably our healthiest player and plays a ton of ISO. Siakam's good for 70 plus games a year. Oops,
Yeah, no, I was just thinking, just like I see your point, and I'm thinking of when you play iso ball and it's just you with the ball and your teammates kind of spread out. There's no back screens, there's no cutting technically with iso ball, and everyone else in essence stands around,
mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
So the person with the ball more likely then would be more taxed with energy because they're the ones doing the work,
Mm-hmm.
and It would depend on like help defense. Like, are they going to help? Are they going to stay with their man? But if you have the personnel where they have to stay with their man because you've got shooters all around you, then that's a different story. Now, I don't mean to go back to the Raptors on this, but this is I just want to make my point on this. If Siakam has the ball and he's on the floor with, let's just say it's Boucher, and then there's Pirtle, and then there's maybe Trent's the only floor spacer, real floor spacer. Where are those defenders on Boucher and Pirtle going to be?
Right. Well, they're going to be sagging, right? We know
They're going to be
that.
sagging. They're going to be in the key.
Yeah, and there's no two ways about that. But I guess what I'm saying is what Siakam will usually do in that situation is either he pulls up for a mid-range shot from about 10 feet out, right? Or he kicks out to one of the guys because he has enough gravity to pull it out to at least one of the shooters, if that's the case. Or he might be able to, if the guy comes up, he's got the dump off in this case for Pirtle, right? Those are the scenarios you're looking at. I guess what I'm wondering is a little bit that there might be a correlation where in this case, if I know I can control where my body is, I'm not going to put my body in. I'm going to put my body in less harm's way in this case than if a guy's playing more off the ball in this case. I do wonder a little bit. You start thinking about guys in this case that do a little more backdoor cut and stuff like that. Klay Thompson, for example, kind of hurt in this case here. Chris Middleton runs off a lot of screens and picks.
I guess Danny Green at one point.
Danny Green,
Middleton plays a lot of ISO ball too. Yeah, sorry, come on.
Who?
Middleton, he plays a lot of ISO, but he's able to.
He does play it, but not to the same extent, like say his partner does, Giannis, right? Mm-hmm. Like I'm just like, if I look at what they do with him, I'm just thinking other players that play more like kind of like a bit of both in this case here. Like for example, DeRozan, he never gets hurt, and he plays a ton of ISO ball. Like DeRozan, the only reason DeRozan sits out is if they want to rest him. He's not due to injury. I remember last time DeRozan had an injury, like it's like where he actually had to be out for the injury. It's like DeRozan's always playing.
Well, I mean, the sad thing is Kawhi.
right, Kawhi, but
he's the outlier there, but that's for other reasons.
True. But I do wonder if Kawhi's early years, when he didn't have as much ISO in this case here, is where the injuries started piling up, which is earlier in his career.
It's possible. I think, yeah, that
might be something interesting to look at because he didn't get the injuries during his time as like in this case here when he was like as an ISO heavy player. He had the one ISO heavy year. But maybe the damage was already done when he was an ISO player, perhaps. Like, I don't know. It's just interesting to think of ISO players. You think of like a lot of them stay more healthy than we think. Carmelo.
Now, within that, I want to kind of switch over to the playoffs, specifically the Boston Celtics and their lineup and how they looked this year and how they will look. I looked at the shot charts of guys like Tatum, and I was shocked by, yes, he's very good at what he does. But it was like two zones. It was around the arc and inside, and that was it. There was no mid-range. And so when you, Beyond, have told me he relies on the step back three, I'm like, damn, he does actually really rely on the step back three. And that's really all he has. And it's like now that they have a guy that they lost, he used to say, hey, let's move the ball around a little bit more and get better shots. Not saying that he was the best shot taker or maker, but, hey, there was that accountability there. I'm really curious to see what happens with a team like that, where they're now going way more into just relying on the three. Because as much as we said the ISO ball, and that's you can use ISO ball to get a three, and I think none of us think that ISO ball is the most optimal way for the Raptors. I don't think any of us think that it's the most optimal way for Scotty Barnes or Siakam. So I think if you're looking at a team like the Boston Celtics, it's going to be very interesting to see how they do. I actually think in the regular season they'll have highs and lows, but they'll end up being a little bit better in the regular season. I think that they could run into scoring droughts in the playoffs, because I think if you rely too much outside of the mid-range and just on threes and layups, especially if your rim penetration stops against certain teams, you can run into trouble. I don't know if you guys want to comment on that, but yeah.
Or beyond.
I mean, like these look, man, these pocket protector dudes that are in the front office, man. Listen, guys, enough. You didn't
Wait,
learn.
when you said pocket, do you actually mean like analytic
Yes,
nerds?
yes. These dudes, they're up in the front
Okay,
office.
I figured like someone with an actual pocket
They
protector
think
for
they
their
figured out more basketball than
pens.
anyone else that actually played the game in this case. Even guys like me that played a little bit, this guy always played basketball recreationally and stuff like that, that know enough in this case what to do and what not to do. And you can tell these guys have never actually played a basketball besides maybe played a horse. Because I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, how do you expect to sustain yourself in the playoff series in this case if you're only feeding off of layups and threes? We saw it years ago in Houston. 27 straight in a row. Like, how many more ways it failed miserably?
So many people forget
fight.
about Houston, and I keep bringing it up because that's like the clear-cut example. I'm like, how do you guys forget? Like, they were the team, and like they were supposed, like they were a really good team, like really good team. But it's like you saw so many shots. I remember Barkley saying like, "What the hell are these dudes doing? Like, get your butt in the post, get a layup or
Now,
something."
here's the
Yes.
irony. Here's the irony of that series that everyone forgets a little bit. I believe, is this the 27 with the 27 shots? Was Chris Paul, is that the one Chris Paul was hurt or not hurt?
I think he was hurt. Yeah.
He was hurt, right? Now he's the one guy who could get a mid-range jump shot for them.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Exactly.
that's true.
He's the one guy who gets his own shot from the mid-range to sustain them in those droughts. But in this case, once they had that, they had no idea what to do. You ask yourself the question why Boston has these crazy series where they can look unreal one game. Like them in Miami last year was fascinating. Not this past year, the year before. Because people forget that series where almost every game except the last game of the series was 30-point blowouts. Because everyone was shooting threes. And if you happen to be hot that night, you're going to win. If you happen to be cold that night, you can start the engines, fellas. It's a wrap by halftime. Okay?
So, I'll just add one other thing. Sorry to interject here, but again, James Harden is another one where it's like you look at his shot chart. He does not thrive in the mid range. People go back to the Phillies series if you have to, but it's like he only thrived in two places, and he's not the biggest thriver in terms of his ability to score at the rim because he's a foul merchant, right? Which there's nothing wrong with being that. It's just he's either good from like the corners or above. He's pretty decent above the break. Especially on the right-hand side of the floor. But where he struggles is in the mid-range. There's not a lot of shots that are coming from the mid-range,
and
just in terms of volume.
Right. And this goes into, and this is where the chicken or the egg syndrome. Are the coaching staff in the front office, when they go in the offseason and telling these guys, you need to work on X, right? It means you need to get your three-point shooting and be better, Jason, referring to Tatum. You too, Jaylen Brown. That's what you need to be doing. And no one's actually worked on any other facets of their game, right? We've gone 7 years now because Tui was hurt, and everyone tell me, oh, Joel Embiid's got footwork as good as Olajuwon. Look, I watch Olajuwon play. Okay, he ain't got no footwork near Olajuwon. Okay, that's a no. If I'm Olajuwon,
don't even understand.
Like, who? You must be talking about my cousin because it can't be me you're talking about. That dude is just a jump shot. He has no back to basket game. Let me tell you, folks, you want to win a championship. If you got a talented team, let me give you a few cheat notes, okay? One, you better have a guy get a mid-range shot that's consistently can do one. Two, if you don't have that, you better have a post-up player who can get his back to the basket. Because if you don't have that dude either, you're not winning a championship. You're gonna go through droughts. And until Embiid learns that, you know what? I might as well get my back to the basket. Because what ends up happening, you keep shooting jump shots, and it doesn't matter if you're 7'2". Because by the time you're shooting jump shots, you might as well be 6'2". It's all the same.
Yeah, and he moves further and further away from the hoop. I was talking to S. Vanderi on we didn't go like when I say back and forth, it wasn't like a huge argument, but he brought up Embiid and how like there's like injury stuff, and I said like yes there is, but I said there's a lot of cardio stuff, and I said if you watch during the series, he slinks away quarter by quarter even. Right. Forget game by game.
Yeah. He'll shoot 2 3-pointers in the first quarter. And by the time you get the fourth quarter, he's launching out there like he's Steph Curry. Right? Yeah. And you don't want any part of the basket. So this thing, and so there's so once again, I keep saying this, folks don't want to listen. It's like, yo, man, you want to win a championship? Giannis in this case, the irony of the Giannis championship. I said at the time, I told my buddies, the best thing that happened to Giannis in that series, Giannis got hurt just the right way. Because in this case here, it slowed down his movement, and he had to play back the basket for him to be effective. And lo and behold, what happened? A 50 piece in the deciding game.
Yeah, that's what I said. I was like, Bud finally used him as a small ball center, and like,
no, it's out of necessity because he couldn't do what he did from the top of the key because of the injury. So it was like, oh, back the basket, and voila, what a shot.
But think of Kawhi Leonard when we won the championship the year. How many times did we see him catch it in the post? He would face up, jab step, shoot in the guy's face.
Mm-hmm.
And then he would get the ball again in the post. Here comes a double team. Oh, there's Kyle Lowry, there's Danny Green, there's Fred open for three. So now, because he made that mid range shot, and because he is a threat to score in the mid range, defense has to come and help. You're not going to just let him score. Then someone's wide open for three. Because Kenyon had mentioned how Jason Tatum, his shot chart is basically threes and layups or dunks or whatever.
Right.
Why did Houston lose? 27 missed threes because they never had anyone that could shoot mid-range jumper except Chris Paul, who was out that time. So as important as threes are, like I get the analytics on, threes, it's better to take them, and then layups and dunks, forget the mid-range. You still want to have a mid-range game because if the Raptors just decide to take threes and layups, they would have lost.
I mean, I'm an analytics guy, but at the same time, you can't just hyper rely on analytics. Also, I think that some people misuse and misunderstand analytics at the right times. Not going to go into that discussion. I will actually, a little plug for myself on my own channel, I guess, but I do plan on having a series about, basics of analytics and how to, combine it with film study. This is something that I want to plan for maybe closer to the, I don't want to say December. I don't want to give myself that much runway, but closer to maybe September of this year. So people stay tuned for that. But yeah, I agree with everything you guys are saying. So yeah, I mean, I think the only other thing that I will say is that iso ball is interesting because defensively, if you have, I guess you can kind of zone up, and if you don't have the right shooters around it, and also if you don't have someone who can thrive in the mid range, either A, because their shot isn't that great, or B, because their dribbling isn't that great to get into the mid range. And trust me, we have some people on this team, and I'm not talking about Siakam, and just there's some people in the NBA in general that struggle to get to the mid range. Forget about getting to the hoop, because Siakam can get to the hoop, but getting into the mid range is a struggle for some players. And so you need to have the right dribble, you need to have the right ability to create, you need to have the right ability or athleticism to slither down to those places. And if you don't, you could run into a lot of trouble. So I think that one of the things is that I'm curious to see if we start seeing a trend away from iso ball over time. And also, I'm wondering if they, maybe not now, but say in 5 years, because the NBA tries to tinker with the rules. I'm wondering if they tinker the rules in such a way that allows that to happen. Because that they like to tinker with the rules to shift the way that the product looks. And if it looks too homogenized, I'm wondering if they try to open things up in a different way.
I have an answer for that.
Yeah, go ahead, Coach.
Copycat league happens every year. Whoever wins the title, teams try to mimic
True.
what they do. 2014, Spurs won. 2015, Golden State took what they did, and more or less it was on steroids with Curry and Clay, where they had lots of threes. And you saw that for basically the next few years. Basically, it's a form of what we kind of have now. So it depends on best team.
Yeah,
they win, how they win too.
True. Like Denver in this case, like winning this year, obviously they had a lot of different. They did have some motion and stuff like that. They play a lot of pick and roll.
They also had a bench, one heck of a supporting cast.
Well, I think that's the biggest thing I think that's changed from like say years ago now is that you have to have a deeper team now than before. You can't get away with this playing 7 guys and think you can win a championship. You got
even just to make it through the. I mean, you can kind of, even then the West. Some of those Western teams are getting a lot more physical now. Like the Lakers this year. Ooh, that was a physical team. But I think you can get away with that if you're playing a team like say a Phoenix, because they're not as physical, because they're so top heavy that they can't really afford to be physical. But to get through the East for sure, I think you have to have a deep team. like
Yeah.
deep as
Yep.
in deep and rotationally. Like those players have to not just be G League level
Yeah,
guys.
well, it's all right. And I think that last point, like, I think not only going back to your point about the mid range and having the ability to having someone in the mid range or the post is sustain you on offense, but you also need to have, I always a believer, you need to have at least to be a championship quality team, you have to at least have about 7 guys that can play both sides of the court. If you don't have 7 guys to play both sides of the court, you're not going to be a team that's going to be any threat, right? So I always think about when I'm looking at any rosters, like in a playoff series, how many of these guys could be on the court for a playoff series say in the fourth quarter of a playoff game, right? Even with the Raptors, I think right now there probably maybe 5, maybe 6 guys, maybe that could probably play in a playoff game right now. Now, how high a level can they play is the question, but at least I think there's about 5 to 6 guys maybe that they could have right now. Last year it's probably about 4, maybe.
I'd say 6 on the Raptors specifically
Yeah,
for this upcoming year. I would
yeah, I
say.
think there's 6 for sure. Yeah, yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Because I'm including Otto.
Yeah, I have Otto as well as 1 to 6. So at 5, I have 5 guys for sure, and I have a question mark on one other guy.
Okay. Okay. And Coach, you don't have to say it, but how many guys off the top of your head, just in terms of counting in your head, do you think? Because last year I think we had like 5. Period. End of story. Done.
Yeah, I would say
Yeah,
maybe
5.
six, maybe 7 at most.
I'm
I
pushing
can't.
up to 7, but it's like
Oh,
Yeah,
I know the 6 guys. I got a 6 guy. Yeah,
yeah, because I think McDaniel's proved that he
that's
can do
the
it.
6th
Right?
guy I was thinking of. Yeah, I forgot about McDaniels.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah.
I got 6 guys.
So,
y-
but
you
yeah,
you can play that frantic style of basketball that Nurse had them playing defense. You can do that, but you need
so
11 guys.
yes, and you
You
need to
can't do it with
basically
7.
do hockey lineups
Yeah.
Yeah, but the
where
problem
it's
with
like
that,
short stints, quick, 8 minutes at a time, in and out, boom,
Yeah.
done.
So I remember going on RLTV, and it was one of the games where they just looked exhausted, and I think they lost. And they were double teaming, they were rotating, they were trapping. They had a Nurse, I think, went did his press conference, and he said he had like I don't know how many schemes for a certain player. You can do that, but you need 10, 11 guys to do that, not 7.
the only
Yeah.
I would say there's been 3 games this season where that looked effective for the Raptors. The back-to-backs in this case against Atlanta and San Antonio,
Yeah.
where they just destroyed them. And then that I don't know where this game came out of the blue. That Sacramento game in Sacramento, like,
Yes.
Oh yeah, they
Yeah.
were like
they laid the
they were like
smackdown on him.
Dobermans, like just looking for raw meat. Like it was like unbelievable. Like so, Bones thought there was like 8 guys in the court at one point. Like it's like at
Yeah.
one, he's looking around. Wait, another red jersey here? Looked at her, like,
That was on 3 days rest too.
yes, I about to mention that was
Bingo.
yes.
Yeah.
3 days rest, and he played about 9 guys that night. But you're right, it's on 3 days rest. So like, I mean, those things are fine in the regular season, but playing playoff intensity and stuff like that, and then when guys can actually start focusing on your personnel, you can't get all those guys can't be on the court in this case in a playoff game because they'll get
No.
picked on one way or the other, be on offense or defense.
No, you have to it's not something that is like a sustainable chess move, so to speak. But yeah. But with that being said, I think we covered the topic pretty well. We kind of got to the end of it. I don't know if there's anything really quickly that you guys want to plug. If not, we will close this episode of Basketball Rewind, and we will film another one, which you guys will see on another day. So I'm not gonna say which one is gonna come out first. It might be this one. It might be the other one, but you will find out soon. So without a further ado, thank you guys for joining me. Really quickly, is there anything that you guys are working on or that you want to plug, or any charities or anything at all? Now's the
Not
time.
really. Just want to tell folks, get your mid range on, man. That's all, man. Get your mid range on.
True. It is summer too. Enjoy the outdoors and enjoy ball if you can.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, Coach.
Speed up your jump shot.
Yes, and not with video. Anyways, that's a
Yeah.
whole other thing. But yeah, like I said, I think that this was pretty good. I would love to talk about defense another time because again, while we won't get into it now, I think even the way that Darko laid out his principles, which we talked about a little bit, I think that there's ways to conserve defense in general. That I mean, most teams don't play a high wire act like a Nick Nurse. But I think that there's ways to actually build a good defensive team. But we'll get into that on another day. So yeah, that's been it. Hope you enjoyed the episode, and everyone, take care and peace. Like, comment, and subscribe, please. And if you have any thoughts of your own in terms of your thoughts as to why it has gone towards a more ISO-heavy style within the NBA, let me know. All right, take care and peace.